informative forum for foreign visitors of the electoral process 2023-2024 in Mexico. We would like to thank the president of Electoral Institute, as well as of the Electoral Tribunal at the Judiciary. And we would also like to thank the evidenced it during last year's meetings to start the preparation for the visits, the observation of different visions to our country. We established what has been done since 1994. This process, the process entailing sharing with you all of the details in general of the electoral process in Mexico on behalf of the administrative authority. And we also started a synergy of cooperation with the Electoral Tribunal and with the public body here in Mexico City in order to be able to share with you the different stages that the electoral process holds. In our as our commitment, we would like to share with you each of the stages in the detail that you needed. But this is one of the first commitments. The second one is to offer you anything that you may need in order to fulfill your missions. Please rest assured that with your participation, observation, conclusions, and feedback, we will strengthen the democratic system in Mexico. I am also sure that in permanently and tirelessly searching democracy in the world, we make our purposes compatible to each of your countries as well. I am very sure, and of course, I know I am accountable being in front of you today because I know that each observation, each suggestion, each piece of feedback that you share with us will be valued by the National Electoral Institute, the INE in short, and also by the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary, led by the President Mónica Areli Soto Fragoso. The responsibility of being with you today, welcoming you, being here for you is quite high and quite significant. We will make the electoral process in Mexico every time better. We will help it improve every year in everything that is up to us. There are several topics that will be addressed with you. We know that there are different missions that have already been holding meetings with the Institute, with political parties representatives, and there is also the intention of establish communication with the different candidacies. Definitely this adds up to having an overview of the current context in our country for the development of this process. We are really glad that we know we made our best effort so that everything is ready, so that on Sunday, June 2nd, every citizen will be able to go out and vote. Until now, all of the conditions are all set so that our efforts won't be just for this couple of days, but that we can build on them. In general, the Institute, as well as the higher Directorate of Guidance, works through commissions, and these commissions have evidenced and have accepted the submittal of different complaints that may have arisen from this project that will be closing today with presidential debates and with the invitation of the different members of the countries that you represent, and all of those efforts have to be ready. Of course, we are still very aware that something could happen, so we have to be very attentive in order to face any situation that may arise, any situation that, of course, hasn't been planned and that is not really in the hands of the National Electoral Institute. But we are ready. We are ready and willing so that everything is ready for June 2nd for the installation of more than 100 polling booths that will be installed. So welcome. We would like to welcome your experience, your cooperation, your willingness to support us in our democracy, and any suggestion that you may have will be welcomed with open arms. So have a great day today. Thank you. It is important to highlight that this is, in Mexico, the electoral process that has had the highest number of foreign visitors. During this electoral process, we have 1,309 certified persons from all 5 continents that are accompanying and observing this electoral process in the 32 different states that conform Mexico. So it's really a pleasure, and it's an honor to know that the world's eyes are on us and they are very attentive to the results. Now I would like to pass the floor to the President of the Electoral Tribunal, Monica Lee Soto Fragoso. Please welcome. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We welcome and salute the world. We at the Electoral Tribunal salute the world. Thank you for having taken the time and for taking the time to be in this transcendent electoral process in Mexico in order to observe in detail and with a magnifying glass each of the stages of this electoral process. I would like to welcome and salute the President Chancellor of the National Electoral Institute, Guadalupe Tadei Zavala, and with her I will be sharing this first session of the informative forum for foreign visitors. This is the first time that both electoral institutions in our country, the ultimate institutions, are presided by women. And this is the token, this is evidence of the progress that parity democracy has had in our country. I would also like to welcome and salute the electoral authorities that are joining us today. Especially, I would like to welcome those that are the members of the international community that provides follow-up to electoral processes in our country. This forum provides special importance and is of a special importance for the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary, which is the last institution in electoral matters in our country. It is the ultimate one. So this is another opportunity that we have to address you 3 days before the electoral process in order to discuss the nature, functions, and mandate of the electoral body that I am honored to preside. It is an honor to welcome your missions in order to offer you an overview on our work before, during, and after the elections. I would also like to salute and welcome councillors and members of the Electoral Tribunal that are joining us today. Mexico is a country of electoral institutions, sound electoral institutions. Since it was created more than 3 decades ago, we have adapted to an ever-changing contexts. Our faculties, authorities, integration, and nature have transformed along with evolution of democracy. However, conviction and commitment with the constitutional, democratic, and electoral integrity principles are the ones that hold them together. Today, as a jurisdictional body and as the last resort in terms of electoral matters, the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary has consolidated itself as an institutional warrantor of the rights related to the participation and political representation when resolving the political and electoral rights of the citizens. When we do so, we do it with absolute independence, responsibility, impartiality, and autonomy. Our institutional history has evolved thanks to the international observation and surveillance. It was in 1994 when, for the first time, foreign visitors were certified for Mexican elections. Only 2 years later, by means of the amendment of 1996, the 10th Federal Electoral Tribunal joined the Federal Judicial to adopt its current design. Since then, and even after the amendments, 2 years later, our mandate hasn't changed, guaranteeing the principles of constitutionality and legality in all of actions and resolutions in electoral matters. What has changed is the vision and the perspective to trial and judge, always highlighting human rights, where the political and electoral rights of Mexicans lie. In order to comply with this goal, this jurisdictional body has a higher chamber, 5 regional chambers, and 1 specialized chamber. Each of them correspond to the country's division, and the specialized chamber, among others, welcomes and hears of political advertising campaigns, particularly those in radio and TV. The electoral observation missions and the observation by experts and the monitoring that committees that you belong to, after 3 decades of evolution, today deploy expert women and men that know and analyze the work of our chambers, its functioning, the institutional policies that we implement, and of course our sentences and rulings. The more than 1,309 persons that have been certified as foreign visitors before the National Electoral Institute for ongoing electoral processes conform a plural group that has committed to respecting the activities of electoral authorities, political parties, and candidates to the more than 20,000 positions of popular elections that are being disputed. More than 20,000 positions that have the obligation to adhere to parity regulations. Yes, the activities of many of them will focus on the electoral day that will be held next Sunday. Others have also been looking after the jurisdictional preparation before E-Day, and they will continue their activities after E-Day. Some of them include analyzing mandate and functions of the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary, as well as the collegiate work and the functioning of the members that integrate it, the judging with gender perspective and inclusion, and those violet lenses that you see there, those classes, are the symbol of the learning that throughout 30 years the Electoral Tribunal has developed as a methodology to try with gender perspective and with substantive equity-based trying that addresses groups that have historically been in disadvantaged position and that have been invisibilized, such as women, people belonging to our indigenous communities, migrants, Mexican and Afro-descendant people, people with disabilities, people that belong to the sexual diversity, among others, where through agreements with the Federal Electoral Institute that were ratified or subscribed by the higher chamber, today place Mexico in a high standard of protecting these vulnerable groups. You will also see the performance of public defenders' offices and the innovations and surveillance and support of the General Secretariat of Agreement. As you will be able to see when you collect information, the Electoral Tribunal will meet with its mission in the time established by law, and on August 3rd, the latest, they will solve any inconformity that's submitted about the elections that have to do with representatives and senators. And on August 31st, the latest, those that will be received on the elections for the presidency of the United Mexican States. Also, on September 6th, the latest, the corresponding declaratory will be performed on the presidential elections. So in this sense, Mexican electoral justice plays a critical role in our democratic system, since it acts as an impartial guarantor of the political rights of the citizens. Its function is not only to solve electoral controversies, but also to protect and expand fundamental rights in electoral contexts. The dimensions of this work also reflect that those participating in elections come to us when they believe that their rights have been violated. In order to give you a little bit more perspective, the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary, from the beginning of this electoral process that started on September 7, 2023, and until May 27, we have received more than 6,000 challenges in stages previous to the electoral process, to the actual one. And we will be adding those that may be subjected after E-Day, on Sunday, June 2nd. We have an expectation that there could be around of the 18,000 challenges submitted. In this context, I would like to highlight that all of the members, all of the spaces that each of us as justices have integrating the higher chamber, are prepared in order to face the possible jurisdictional workload and burden. Please rest assured that the justices that are part of the plenary of this higher chamber and regional chambers are ready and prepared to address challenges submitted and to resolve timely, as the Electoral Tribunal has always done in its almost 30 years of existence, so that there won't be any challenge means without solving. It is a known fact that currently the higher chamber works with 5 out of 7 justices, and the regional chambers also have 1 pending justice to be appointed by the Senate. Seeing this situation, we have doubled our efforts and our work that corresponds to us, to the Electoral Tribunal. The appointment is not within the authorities of the Electoral Tribunal. Justices' appointment is one of the responsibilities of the Senate. Facing this, the Electoral Tribunal has taken the corresponding and right measures in order to timely comply with our functions and responsibilities. This tribunal has guaranteed the unrestricted continuity. The processes of all of the procedures are our responsibility, and we have adhered to the constitutional mandate without any shortcomings, and we have also timely addressed these more than 6,000 challenge means that have been submitted until now. That's the way it has been, and that's the way it shall be during the rest of the electoral process. And of course, also for the reigning of the presidential elections, where the law establishes the procedure that should be performed in order to work under these conditions. During this informative forum, you will also hear about relevant rulings and institutional policies that have aimed to strengthen the inclusive characteristic of our democracy. A recent innovation in the field of the Electoral Tribunal is the creation of the Specialized Public Defender's Office, which is specialized in addressing gender-based political violence. We are very honored, and especially and above all, we know how responsible it means to be the first public defender's office, I don't know if in the world, but at least in Latin America, with this specialty. And of course, this makes us more responsible and accountable with women because of this historical debt that we have had with them. As you know, a parity lies in our Constitution. It is a mandate, an obligation. When we are able to reach this parity in 2019, gender-based political violence against women increased. That's why we consider to specialize the public defender's office in order to address women so that this disadvantage doesn't hinder their access to justice. I would also like to add that the Electoral Tribunal created in 2023 an Electoral Public Defender's Office that welcomes the rest of the groups in vulnerable situations with subjects that don't have to do with gender-based political violence that require a specialized approach. Last but not least, I would like to add that we also have had innovations such as the online trial, and this allows to bring justice closer to populations that are also further away and to facilitate the submittal of means of challenge by means of an email, for example. My dear colleagues of the international community, yesterday I was mentioning before some of you that your presence not only helps us and strengthens us to make our functions more transparent, but it also allows us to benefit, to institutionally benefit from your experience, vision, and knowledge. The reports and other documents you will provide will be testimony and evidence of your commitment with democracy and human rights. That's how the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights has acknowledged it in its resolution 1/24 when defining that observers, electoral observers such as yourselves, are defenders of human rights. That's why I would like to congratulate you for your work and interest in knowing every detail of our functions and performance. And I would like to acknowledge your participation before, during, and after the electoral process. You will be witnesses of the largest and biggest elections in Mexico, the most parity elections, the most inclusive, and the most observed and surveilled. I would like to close by ensuring that those that come to the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary, whatever and wherever they come from, politically speaking, you will find the same answer. Sentences, rulings adhered to legality, impartial, that will be impartial, independent, and with autonomous decisions and opinions. The doors of electoral justice in Mexico are always open for everyone, and also for your scrutiny. Thank you very much, and let's all bid great success. Electoral. Thank you very much, Justice Monica Soto. Thank you, President Guadalupe Tadei. Thank you. And with this message, with this welcoming message, which is also a message from both presidents that has a lot of valuable content because it let us know how important this election is, but also the commitment of their institutions to carry out all of the work needed. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this informative forum for foreign visitors of the electoral process 2023-2024 in Mexico. Thank you.
Great pleasure for me, one, to have you joining us and taking the time to travel to join us with this electoral process. We know that many people are already in the field, but I thank you for being attending these forums with the National Electoral Institute for Mexico City and national one. In this table, we will be discussing gender perspective, affirmative actions, inclusion. As you have already heard, this is the first time that in our country, electoral authorities, you know that the Mexican system is incorporated three institutes: National Electoral Institute, that is headed by a woman for the first time. Then we have the Electoral Tribunal, that is also chaired by a woman. And then we have the tribunal that does not have a woman, but we're on the way of having a woman heading that. I know that some of our visitors were with us back in 2021. Some things have changed from parity and inclusion-wise since 2021. In this electoral process, they already told you this is the largest inside, that we will be electing over 20,000 elected positions, that unlike other systems, electoral systems, in Mexico, parity comes from the Constitution. It is set forth in the Constitution. So the fact that it is within the legal frame or being set forth in the Constitution was not enough. That is why back in 2021, we had to make an agreement to apply that principle of parity when elected governors. And there we had a very quick effect to that regard. In Mexico, we started to vote, women started to vote back in 1955. For 2020, only 7 women had been elected as governors of a state. In 65 years, 7 women. So yes, the right to vote and to be voted was present, but it was not complied with. So the development that we have had now, we can say that thanks to the way that we have construed the Constitution, now it is almost compelling to respect that parity principle. We have nowadays 9 women governors. So in 3 times, we have achieved to have a better representation of women. That was thanks to the legal framework and the construence of gender enforcement to enforce those principles. And then you see that we have these chairs or presidents at the INE and at the Electoral Tribunal. So many things have gone on. We have progressed so much since 2021, and we can share with you that all the nominees had to sign by oath. They were not within the assumption of having exercised violence against women, political violence against women because of gender. So in 2020, 2021, that is, comes from the guidelines that we created. But by 2024, the law has changed. Now it is set forth in the Constitution. There was a reform, Article 38 constitutional, that talks about 8 assumptions that can take your right to be a nominee running for office. So persons that have violently attacked the people will not be able to be nominees running for offices. And that comes with several issues, because there's not a secondary law that can tell you that you have to register all those 8 conditions. We talk about the people that do not pay allowances to their families. And so there's not a register in our country of people that have been condemned by sexual violence against women or gender violence. So even if those are some of the assumptions that you have to sign by oath, that you are not under those 8 assumptions, we not only have to have the legal framework, but we have to have the other instruments that will accompany them, so we can really enforce it. So we have to be verifying all the nominees that will not fall into those assumptions. So we had to request information to dozens, tens of organizations, either at a state level, federal level, so we could obtain information on those nominees that are running for office, because one thing is the homonymia that is in there as well. And so all those exercises led us to find 20 cases, but we were not able to cancel their registration as nominees because there has to be a firm sentence or ruling, and it has to be a criminal ruling, a criminal sentence. So that's another interesting thing to observe, because you know that in Mexico since 2020 we have a national record for persons that are having sanctioned for political violence, but they have received punishment by an administrative court because they have been involved in political violence. And one would assume that they could not be nominees running for office. However, it is not so. So morally, they can be condemned because they are part of that record, but nothing else that we can do. So just a little overview of what we have been doing these last years and share them with you about these affirmative actions. As you have already heard, we have affirmative actions. To be short, they are the same for the 5 groups that we created in 2021. Indigenous people, diversity sexual, Afro-descendant Mexican people, disabled, and the Mexican citizens living abroad. The Mexican people living abroad can only vote for the presidency and for the Senate, but we made an affirmative action so they can have a representation at the deputy, at the high and low chambers, because in the past they could not vote. So this electoral process are applying this affirmative action for these 5 groups for the election process for the deputy chamber, the Senate, and this is the first time that those affirmative actions will be enforced for the Senate. So what does that mean? Well, it translates into having the political parties of nominate at least 4 nominees for indigenous people, 1 for a disabled person, sexual diversity person, and then 1 representative from abroad for Senate. This is the first time that we are applying this kind of actions nominee-wise. Another development that we had since you came last to Mexico, the non-binary persons, we made a commitment that in an ID voting card, if you want to have your address included or if you want your sex to be included, and we had a huge debate on the sex issue there, because from the general board that we started to see the gender perspective, inclusion perspectives to recognize them. So even if your unique population code does not change, the person that decides that in your ID voting card, you can see men, you have the choice between deciding men, women, or non-binary. So we included this non-binary choice, and from the 98 million Mexican people that can vote, we have registered 102 that are non-binary now. And many measures have been taken. We have a protocol in place, so when they come to the polling sides, this non-binary, if they don't have their physical identity with the ID voting card, we have a protocol in place so they can cast your vote. So we have new measures in place, and we have the Asian measures in place, but now I will hand it over to our architect so she can continue giving you more information about this. Thank you. Hello, and good morning for this electoral days. And I do it very slowly to slow down this rhythm because we are in a full rush in Mexico City nowadays. And I want to invite you to take a deep breath. And let's settle in. And let's settle in this such an important moment that we are living in Mexico, and that Madame de la Cruz has joined us, for which Madame Cruz has joined us today. This is a memorable moment that we are living because we are working on having elections free of violence, and we want that to make that contribution. I'd like to see you into your eyes and acknowledge the pathways that you have been in, and to have this parity. So this is a great event, and I would like to acknowledge it. As you have heard our counselor, there are so many topics that we can share that reflects the achievement in parity, this great reform that started out back in 2014 and that we concluded by 2019. That's total parity. So inside the three different levels of government, we can have this integration. Several topics are to be dealt with, but I wanted to make this pause so we can concentrate that this electoral process, the drive to have women participating is a reality. 10 years ago, the reality for women to participate was something completely different. So I want to share this with you. I defended electoral rights vertically and horizontally at the INPEPAC as a citizen, as a woman, and with all political parties we agreed to defend what had been established by the INE would become a reality. After Morelos and other states, and what am I referring to? Well, we are not doing this alone. This is a joint work from academy, civil society, the nominees, men that have deserted patriarchal ways. We have an electoral counselor, Montaño, for your attendance, because you have helped us to reach this parity. 10 years ago, we didn't have that. It was completely different. We had 3 counselors, women, and the rest were men. But there are little things that have changed, and our scenario has changed. In parity, we have defenders of political rights being women. And from the civil society, they are pushing forward in partnership with others. We have made this parity come true. So I want to take advantage that we have our counselor here, and as he has said, we have to highlight some things. 18 states of the Republic, and write it down correctly, 18 states of our Mexican Republic have never had a woman as governor. They say that we have 9 women governors at the same time. It's not for free. We have been walking through, following the steps of our ancestor women, and now it has become a reality represented by these 9 women governors. But there are, these political parties that might be contesting, challenging their win. But now we can sustain that today it has to be a reality. Yes or yes. Out of those 9 governors, and there are 8 governors of the state, and the mayor for Mexico City. That will be the 9th. Out of those states that will be electing a governor position, we do have 3 women nominees that I am sure they will be winning. That will be Guanajuato and Morelos. And I want to highlight that because I am from Morelos. I had nothing to do. I just been pushing forward with the assistance of my ancestor women. In 155 years, there has not been in my state a women governor. After 69 governors, it will be the first women governor. So I'm taking from this reality all the progress that we have been doing through the INE, and we can acknowledge the great gap of inequalities because, right now we're just assuring to have this minimum ground. It's not our objective, but it's the minimum ground. And now we have to point out that a topic that is calling for a cultural transformation, and I will be now talking about the reform to Article 38, out of 8. And we in Mexico, we like to shorten 8 out of 8. All these 8 assumptions where no person that has to be a nominee should be found or falling within those 8 principles. Why point out political violence? Because that is the stone in the shoe that is hindering us to move forward. And at the municipal level, we don't have women representations. We cannot reach 30% of municipal women participating. If you compare it with aggressions against women at that level, that is where we see more cases of violence at the municipality level. So we have to cross all that information. It is essential that from Mexico to the world, a great proposal will be launched to prevent political violence based on gender. We need a little bit of coffee or tea, because I think that you prefer tea. Well, coffee. If it's Cuban coffee, that will be much better because I love it. So we can enjoy this wonderful talk that we are having, this memorable moment that we are living to comply with the parity at a government elected position. And all this information you can go to through www.ine, and that's a website. And at the bottom of the site, you see that it says Igualdad in Spanish. That will be equality. And you will find all the information related with information of affirmative actions. You can see the breakdown per group, how we have been complying with parity, and the rest of the information available for you. Here we just wanted to start our talk with our counselor, and I agree as our president Guadalupe Tradei says, this comes to crown the Mexican electoral system. It is a great time to put it there. We need to reinforce that our electoral process must be free of violence. Madam, you were talking a while ago of affirmative actions, 8 out of 8, parity at the government level. All this progress that we have made, we have moved forward so much, about having women in government, and we're talking about the local congresses, and now we have more women participating. We have 19. So all this development come about in a political, cultural context. Yes, coming from the electoral, because we received the mandate to assist in some types of violence. But that violence is a structural violence. Even if we adopt actions and measures, we need a psycho-emotional transformation so we can establish different type of relationships. Why at a municipal level do we have more violence? Why? Less than 26%. From 2021, the number of town halls that in 2018 were governed by women was reduced by 2021 in a 2%. Not only we don't have more, but we have less. Why? Because they are attacked, because there's violence against them, and all the thought and all what we are reflecting on can not only remain at the administrative level. We have to go and see the progress of women, but we need to have the support of the organized civil society, the women's movement, of the different women's and our partners for women, and then we will see the outcome of having worked for so many years. We are building, and this is a process that is laying new challenges, new issues that we have to face. Gloria was asking us a question that's quite a specific one, and I will be giving you the context. We are putting in place these affirmative measures, right? What are the measures that the INE has adopted to sanction the failures on those affirmative actions? Yes, we do have affirmative actions for these 5 groups. But in Mexico, for instance, we don't have an authority, an institute that will tell us who is an indigenous person. We have, INPI has a registration of indigenous communities, but it's not something, because here you go and you say that you are an indigenous people, and as according to international norms, you go and you register as an indigenous person. But the category of Afro-descendant Mexican has just been included back in 2015. And that comes from the survey, from the census survey that we do every 10 years. 2% of the population, they recognize themselves as Afro-descendant. And 2.6% are acknowledging themselves as African descent. But you register yourself as that. But there's nothing that says who is considered as of African descent. So there's no institution that will govern that. For the indigenous people, your self-registration was not sufficient, and the justices have to have a qualified registration of indigenous people. It's not enough of me saying that I am indigenous person, but we had to create the guidelines for that, because I have to prove that I have a link to my community, or that the assembly of my community recognizes me, or that I speak an indigenous language. There are multiple possibilities that I can prove that I am a qualified indigenous person. But if you are an African descent Mexican person, just by you claiming it to be, then you are. But if you are disabled, you have to prove that you have a permanent disability, and you need a medical certificate. If you are a migrant, you have to prove that you are a migrant. So, for the African descent, it was like a higher load. So, in addition to all of that, we have this new phenomena that came about when we realized existed back in 2021. The nominees registered by the political parties registered person that will not fall within these affirmative actions. And so we had nominees that came with a certification of a community, and then the community say, no, he's not from our village or from our town, he never comes here or there. Well, you have, talking about indigenous groups, maybe there's only one signature from that community, so that letter is not valid. So we had to adopt new measures. In the case that I described, that this man from the community of the Guerrero that not acknowledged that person as member of their community, us and as authority. Normally, the registration of nominees has to be done by a party. So it is the party in the first instance that would have to check that information. But we have an electoral tribunal and at the state level, at a national level, and at different levels. So within this process, we have heard a lot of challenges. So there was a case where as a political party had a nominee as Afro-descent nominee, and since the Afro-descent said the communities were claiming that he was not. But you cannot say that, because if I claim myself as Afro-descent, well, they were asking him to prove that, but that was not yet in the guidelines. So this political party decided to kick him out because he was not a real African descent. So they had to go to another state to find another nominee that would really justify to be Afro-descent. And this has an effect. And back in 2021, out of 500 low chamber seats, 65 were affirmative actions out of those 500. For all those people that came to this deputy chamber, for indigenous people would have united in a parliamentary group, they would have had a 41-person parliamentarian group.
And they even asked to carry out a study to see the impact of our affirmative actions. So we did, and let me give you the summary. So affirmative actions that were taken are effective to give a number representation. It was quite effective. 65 people got there out of 500 to the House of Representatives. But they are not effective when it comes to advancing the agendas, the programs of those groups. I mean, they were in this legislation, there weren't any changes. I was telling you about the case of Mexicans that live abroad. There are 11 representatives that supposedly are representing Mexicans living abroad. They didn't do any amendment proposal for Mexicans living abroad, would vote for representatives or initiatives by law with public policies and agenda. So this shows that doing it from the electoral, from the administrative standpoint has its value. It is effective. But if there's no change and if there's no agenda, a coordinated agenda that allow you to be able to demand, and not only just to be there to represent, but to legislate in favor of those groups, so you can expand these rights. But what do you think about it? Well, there are many questions. For those of you who organize, you can please tell us how much time we have for those questions, please, because we could really continue and go on, and because we love it. We love talking about this. So I don't know, maybe we can go over a couple of questions. So at the University of Siena, Tania is saying, It's hard if you see it from abroad. It's hard to understand how you got the full parity amendment. Who promoted the amendment? The political elites, because they never accept this amendment. So could you say a little bit more about it? Was there resistance? Oh, yeah, I'm going to read many of them, and afterwards we can go over the answers. Is there any mechanisms to effectively guarantee the possibility of access to parity type of decision-making spaces and women's parties, so that these are not arbitrarily assigned by men from their political parties? This is a great question. What's done to prevent candidates' assassinations? How many of them have been assassinated, have been murdered in this process, and what are the actions that we have to favor the substitution by another woman? Now, what do you understand? What do you understand that could still be missing in terms of parity in Mexico? What do you think? It could be said that parity in just about anything. Can we prevent gender-based political violence? How can you guarantee gender parity in different states? Among others. So this is the first block of questions, if it's okay with you. Well, very quickly, and maybe you can share a story of how we got here, but reluctancy, and resistance. This started in '93. And you were talking about quotas and shares, and at the beginning it was optional. It was optional, they were just suggestion, if you will, but they never would, right? So when they became mandatory, 30%, it was understood that it was women 30% and you put it at the end, right? So we were used like just to fill out the space, filling the space. But moving forward, progressing, every step showed an obstacle, a trap. Here in Mexico, I'm sure you've heard about Las Juanitas. So 9 representatives arrived, but they had to resign, and then the gentlemen that were their standings, they were already behind them, ready to take their place. So this agreement of parity in governors in 2020, and this is just a very brief story. Parity was approved by the Senate in 2019. In 2020, during a session, a senator, a male senator, arrived to explain that we were not understanding what full parity was, that what they had approved in the law, in the act, was not what we understood, that it didn't apply. So they were like, ladies, you don't know what you're going to do, you will risk democracy. And that's what he said to us. Because what if we see women that are not qualified for it? We're like, oh my God. But not only that, the Senate challenged that agreement. Just for you to see what type of resistance we encountered. The senator himself that approved the law challenged the agreement to implement said parity. So what do we need to reach parity? Well, besides having to deconstruct ourselves and to work a lot, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do. And I think that first we have to work with new generations so that they understand that the freedom that my grandma had are not the same ones that I have. And I do hope that the new generation's freedoms and liberties are way wider and they have less obstacles so they can exercise their votes, their rights, and we can live violence-free. It is unfortunate. Any act of violence during campaigns is unfortunate. You were asking about candidates. There's a candidate in Guanajuato that was assassinated yesterday. Yesterday, there was another assassination, another murder in a campaign, and well, you go back to it because on one hand, as an Electoral National Institute, we have to guarantee that elections will be held with everything organized, ready. We don't have police officers. Safety is a responsibility of the state. So yes, we are working in coordination with the state. We have safety roundtables. We have a series of protocols in order to address the candidates that request for our support. We also have a protocol and a special pilot program in order to receive federal candidates that suffer gender-based political violence. So there are measures being taken. Of course, reality is way more, and the safety responsibility is from by all the state, by the full Mexican state. I would like to invite you to go back to the 90s, because this is interrelated. I mean, having international milestones, these huge international conventions, had to happen so that today we can guarantee the principle of constitutional parity. The Mexican feminist movement articulated as it never had in order to reach parity. And I think it is very important to document it and to share it with you. It is a product of a historic fight where activists from their different states were pushing and pushing with women in academia, with counselors throughout the states, with counselors at the Electoral National Institute. It was a huge network. So the House of Representatives and the Senate, the way it was conformed, was critical, starting to push women's to take the seat was great. If we hadn't been able to group women from different ideologies to take seats, then it wouldn't have worked. I mean, that was critical, but it was not for free. It was a product of observing and supporting women from the feminist movement to provide them with tools so that they could give a step in an articulated way, not by themselves. And I wanted to go back to the 90s, because during the 90s in Mexico, the electoral matters, as the counselors said, they would be invited, they would invite parties, political parties, to adhere to the suggestion of registering men and women in equal situations, but it didn't happen. So then it had to be 30%. Now, it was never said that it was to be 70% men and 30% women. That's how political parties thought it was, the 70-30. Now, why am I interrelating this with international conventions and conferences? Because until 93, as you very well know, in Vienna, women were recognized as human. We were recognized, and the rights of our violations were also recognized as a human rights violation. So it is fundamental to go back to it, because that's a result of everything that we have today in Mexico. So we had quotas, yes, we had shares, we had Beijing. Next year we will be celebrating 30 years of Beijing. So at least there, in the 12 different fields, we had the promotion of women's political participation. And another one, if I may, is the mechanisms for the advance of women. If in Mexico we didn't have an institutes of women in states, in municipalities that interconnect this locally, and that's why I'm saying this is a huge machinery. Yes, it is a case study because of the huge dimensions, the geography. But today we've been able to have a strategic use of technology. Taking a selfie won't make any good. Women learned to politically use technologies. So the great progress is being able to build political autonomy of women. So I think that that's where we have to leverage. So what's missing parity-wise? Well, we need to go from quantitative parity, numbers, to qualitative parity, so that there is an impact, having the most presence of women by supporting them, by observing them, but not demanding, because you're a woman, this or that. No, we have to support them, both men and women, so that they can commit to what our Mexican state needs, which is equality, equity. So we need to leverage, definitely. I want to tell you that it is not about the cost. Gender-based political violence is not the cost. It shouldn't be compared with parity. Parity came to show this patriarchal system. It came to unveil all of this patriarchal system, corruption, and how women are removed locally so that they won't sign any checks or they do not receive information. I mean, things that happen in my country. I'm sure it doesn't happen in your countries, but it does happen here. And we have political violence cases, of course, but very quickly I would like to address the fact that this parity council, this council at the Electoral National Institute, approved a program in order to be able to observe, accompany candidates, and prevent gender-based political violence. We have been entrusted with the Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination Technical Directorate, and we are having significant findings that have to do with observing accompanying women in politics during their political participation continuum. From the moment they decide to approach a political party, from the moment they have to do work in order to reach a certain place within the political parties. So they won't just be associated to women's groups, but that they can be in the decision-making table where the resources are, where the auditing is. That's where there are several elements that we have to learn to approach. We shouldn't fear them. We have to name them and we have to be able to work with them. That's the leverage. We are having cases of candidates at a federal level, but also at a municipal level. And something that I want to also highlight is that for this Electoral National Institute, addressing the lives of women is not a pilot program. It is a commitment. It is a commitment. But we are in a study process with this program to be able to identify the variables that will allow to strengthen the response capacity of the Electoral National Institute. And we are working on this pilot program in coordination with the Electoral Tribunal Public Defender's Office, because we know that we cannot do it ourselves. We have to work in cooperation, articulated with other women. So today we have 4 attention hotlines, 24/7, support hotline, so that any candidates can call. And you know at what time they call? At night. At night, because they are done with their campaign, and that's the time where they can call us. And they also have to make sure that the fridge is full, that the kid did his homework, things that we have to ask ourselves if male candidates also do, right? So things that have to do with resignations. Candidate resigns due to personal reasons. These are the personal reasons of female candidates resigning: inequality in raising children, in household chores that has an impact in women deciding if they will participate in what's their right in decision making, from local spaces to federal spaces in our country. That's some of the challenges, feminists would say, so that we can strengthen the capacity to respond. But at the Electoral National Institute, we are committed with the lives of women. Yes, correct. And you asked how political parties are doing in terms of gender equity. Out of the 7 national political parties, 6 of them are led by men. Despite, and you see the General Council, the Electoral National Electoral Institute, how they are presided and led by all men. All of them are men. We had to create guidelines so that political parties not only addressed and eradicated gender-based political violence. I know it's a huge description, but that's the way it is. So we had to prepare some guidelines so that they took measures. Most of the parties had to modify their basic documents. There were some that did it faster than others, of course. In others, supposedly they had a year to do it, but that year went by, they didn't do it, so we had to start reminding them. We had to really embarrass them in public, shame them. 6 of them made it, 1 didn't, because there was a sentence, a ruling, that allows, since they were going to do it when the process started, they decided to allow for the electoral process to go by so that they adapt their basic documents. So on one hand, We have that formality, but the other thing is how women experience it within political parties, and that's another story, a different story. The truth is that something that, oh, sorry, we have 10 more minutes, only 10 more minutes, okay. So these synergies that women in every political party have achieved, and yes, I mean, having the necessary number, because the General Council saw the same thing. During 2020, after July, for the first time, we were 5 female councillors. So we were able to push on parity agreements, and many of these agreements that it's not that those efforts were not there, but there was no critical numbers that could push. And here, we were asked 2 questions. One is about, and it's by the Lompe, how do you identify non-binary people? When you go to the poll, the ID says non-binary, and the roster also says non-binary. So, and we also have a protocol. So, if your ID says non-binary, if it states it, if I go dressed as Norma, but my ID says Juan, we have a protocol so you can vote. And of course, with a human rights perspective and inclusions perspective, we know that this is also an ongoing development. How do you monitor the electoral process if you use technology, like video cameras, all that? Yes, we have a series of systems, Christine. We do not use video cameras inside the polling booth, but we do have a monitoring system. We have a system that is fed by reports. For example, the electoral day of our electoral trainers, they report, and this system allows to provide follow-up to the electoral process. We use technology for quick counting, for preliminary programs, for these elections, and later you will receive more information about it. But for these elections, those of you that will go to observe Mexico City or Mexico City surroundings, or if you go to Nuevo León, over there in Monterrey, we have a pilot program for the first time where all of the special polling booths will be using electronic ballots. So this is at a pilot program level. These are 71 special polling booths, for 43 in the metropolitan region of Monterrey. We have six, the most urbanized ones. And it is a pilot program. The vote, it will be valid because in Mexico, the use of technology for the vote is in the law, but for Mexicans that are abroad, though they are the ones that vote online with an electronic ballot, right? But now it is going to be also a pilot program here in Mexico. Yes, this is very valuable. Political parties are forced to hand in their prerogatives in order to strengthen leadership and promotion of political women. And they have to test in actions in order to prevent political violence against women due to gender-based political violence. So we have to establish that 3% has to be done so that it strengthens political values, because you always find alternatives, because we do have it and we have to strengthen it. It is 3%. This can grow. And at a local level, I already told you that at the Electoral National Institute, equality-wise, there is a flyer where we see all of the OPLEs, the percentage that they give, and the OPLEs are really advantaged. There are some that give 3%, up to 9%. Well, not really the OPLEs, the political parties. And the OPLEs are the local public bodies. But it is also important to add that political parties are forced to hand in a report on how they are observing these gender-based political violence cases. But something that we have to reflect, I don't know if you remember during the 70s, where they started recognizing domestic violence and sexual violence as a public problem. Well, today recognizing political violence is also a public problem, as domestic violence was once, because domestic violence has to be fixed at home. That's what we were told. Imagine. So, gender-based political violence cases, we have to reflect if party justice have to be strengthened and to see if it is enough or if we have to find other mechanisms. And there are many more questions. Yes, online. So, if you need anything, please let us know. I am a WhatsApp away from you during these electoral times. For the councillor, it's a little bit harder. But at the National Electoral Institute, we have this task mandated by the councillors and the Technical Directorate of Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination. It has been a pleasure to to build bridges to you towards substantial equality and equity. Very briefly, I would like to thank you for your time. I mean, you being here, you cannot really know the importance it holds for us. You know that Mexicans really like everything, like largest and the biggest, and I mean, really like the superlative. So this has been the biggest visit that we've had. So we have to raise the bar on quality. So hopefully you will have a great experience here in Mexico, and we are going to be very attentive to your reports, your recommendations, your feedback, and whatever you want to share, please. So thank you for your attention and have a great day. I would like to thank Flor de Cireleva and Norma de la Cruz. I'm going to tell you a secret. Norma de la Cruz has a session in 10 minutes. But that's the level of commitment and importance that this meant for her. But she was like, I have to start on time and conclude on time because I have a session to attend to, but I want to be there, right? So thank you very much, Madam Councillor, Architect, and thank you everyone. So we are going to have a brief break so we will continue with table
We're going to start our third session of this interactive group. Now we will be integrating and welcoming to all of you to Mexico City as organizers of the Electoral Institute for Mexico City. Very important topic that we will be dealing with today. Some say that this is the machine room of electoral process. That is the operations and the organization of electoral process and systems here in Mexico, all the administration at a local and national level. We will be telling you about our experience, and now I would like to greet Erika Estrada Ruiz, that is our counselor, and from the INE, Mr. Garibay, that is in liaison with local groups, and Miguel Ángel Patiño, Executive Director of Electoral Organization. Well, you see that you have a great panel before you. We are honored to have them with us today, and then they can tell you about the Mexican electoral system that integrates a very powerful federal organization and then bringing it down to our local authorities. And now I will give the floor to Miguel Ángel Patiño. Hi, good morning to all of you. It is a great pleasure for me to be at this forum, and I will go directly to the topic because it's very broad and it is highly complicated to talk about so many things, but I think it's worthwhile. We start in the reform made in 2014, and we have the national election system, and then we have all the willingness of the federal electoral system as well as all the local public bodies. And then we are appointing all those that have integrated in the local councils as well as assignments for faculties or attributions that our Constitution sets forth for the electoral bodies. And from there on, we start to see which are the places where they will be interacting. When local and federal elections took place, that is for governors and local elections, municipal elections took place, we started to create what we called a merit ballot. First, there was one lineup to vote for the federal level, the election at the federal level, and after casting their vote in each of the ballot boxes, they had to go to the ballot place where they will line up again and they will be casting their vote for the local elections. But the time that they took them to cast a vote by the federal was too long because they have to go through the filtering, and then they had to check his voting card, and then he had to have a mark in his finger so he could not vote again. And then he had to make the same process for the local or state election. So they really didn't feel like voting for both, and sometimes they decided this line is shorter, then I will only be voting for local and I will skip voting for federal election. So those were the conflicts that we were observing, but it became much more complex right there. But between the federal and local governments, there was a dispute between who will be casting the votes because it had to do with all the logistics of installing all these ballot sites. Who will be receiving the furniture, the table, the chairs? If the first one came in was a local, then he would be saying, well, this furniture was for me and not for the federal election staff. So, there were so many resources invested. So the more the demand, the more the cost will be going up. So as from that time, we started to create one single ballot place. The citizens now, they go through the free ballot box station where they will be checked or their identity, and then they will go to the ballot box. So local and federal are working in a coordinated way. That is the single ballot box that we have created, and it was established at a central level. We have to meet certain criteria, which are the competitive blocks that are being established in order to determine where the registration is going to be taking place, encouraging women participation, and vulnerable groups or discriminated groups could be encouraged to participate. And then we have all these affirmative actions that related to all these groups. And then we started to say, well, we only have one competent body for the registration. So everything that happened at a local level will have to be registered on a national level for the nominees, and from there all the information will go to the watching or fiscalization or surveillance area. Relevant aspects, that's where they will be keeping the electoral papers, where all that documentation will be kept. Even if it seems that it's very simple, it becomes very complex in practice. So we started to establish the model of the ballot. And on the first elections, what we did is, well, send us your designs, and then we received a different design from entity of the federation, and then we had to check if they met all the criteria, and from there send them to printing. So we had so many models at a design level, at a national level, that we decided to create one unique model, one for the municipalities, and then another one for the national election or federal election. It seems that it's as easy, but not really, because you don't know how many queries we receive, because those is one of the topics that is very difficult to accept. But we also have to realize how the production, the printing of the materials from each of the local institutes is taking place, because at the end, they have to go to this single ballot place, and the institute is responsible for all those ballot places. And then we have to integrate the tables that will be managing the ballot box. In a transitory article, in a delegated way, we give the powers to the local body to decide where they will be, what will be the location of all those ballot places. So those are the kind of operations that will be under the responsibility of the head of that ballot place. And we need to do all the training for all those people that will be participating at the ballot place during the election day. Then we have the local public bodies that will be hiring people, And then we have the production of materials, all the documentation for the lectures, over 500 million papers that have to be printed in a coordinated way. We have to transfer all those documents to the different ballot places at a federal local level. Then we do a seal counting. So all the ballot places will be receiving according to what they will be using. There are no more everything has been cross-checked according to the electors' voters. So there are no papers or ballots that will be available in case somebody shows up to vote and it is not being considered at that ballot site. So all those documentations are received by the chair of that ballot place. That will be the person acting as responsible for what's going on at that ballot place. So on the election day, the unique ballot place has this effect. Here, the INE will be in charge of, it's a word that we use very often, that we will be enabling, furnishing this ballot place, so everything will be ready for that election day. They will have delivered all the ballot boxes, all the persons involved in being there to check the rosters and everything will be in place. And at the end of the day, we will be receiving the federal elections rosters and the local elections roster. And now we will be transferring either individually or jointly all the tally of those elections. That is to say, at least 2 boxes come out from that ballot place. One for the federal and the other one for the local one. So we can also have by these concentrated bodies for municipal and for state level, and then we will be giving security to that transfer. We can identify that within all those packages there is a local document that by mistake was in the federal package. Then we will send it over, we will forward it to the local authorities so they can tally that vote at the local election level. Because when we receive that package at a municipalities where they have 2 or 3 districts at a federal level, the kind of persons that will be filing up, if you can be in line for a long period of time, and because of that long period of time that you have been in that file, and that lineup, you may make a mistake and deliver the package to a wrong person and ending up at a different place to which it was intended. So that's a wrongly checked custody change, as we call it. So we have a custody change that has to be very carefully checked from the moment that the ballot is published, printed, even at the time that the security level has to be incorporated when the security paper is being printed. And then there will be also security in place where the ballots are being printed. And then will be security all throughout that chain where this document is being transferred. By the time they reach the INE's warehouse, we will have the military present there, the Marine that will be present there, that will be securing all those ballots. And then we realize how that all those documents are being transferred, and then we are seeing how it is coming back throughout the system that we have put in place until they reach their last destination. Each step is very important for us because we cannot neglect the place where that paper is found, that ballot is found. And that's where we include all the involvement of the local public bodies. And we see all the tools that they will be using, either IT, in order to do the tally, and then the declaration of validity of each of the elections. I can tell you that in 20 minutes, but it took us over 9 months to put all this system in place. Throughout the electoral processes, we have become much more efficient during election day and protect what is the most important thing for us is each of the citizens' vote in the entire country. And I think it has been useful for you, and I think that my colleague will continue with its presentation. We thank Miguel Ángel Patiño, Executive Director for INE. Now, Giancarlo Giordano Garibay, Head of Liaison with the OPLE. Well, it is a great pleasure for being here with you. Welcome. I think that the two people that were there when I joined the Institute are here with us, and it is a great honor to be sharing this space with them. I have been for 10 years here, so, you know, just imagine how long they have been. In the reform of 2014, here in this image, I have put the most relevant reforms, but we give it a domestic level to the INE. And what we were aiming, or the legislators were looking for, was to standardize all these procedures. A great progress had been made in perfecting all of this, but at a domestic level, at a federal level, but at a local level, not all the entities were applying it in the same way. So the legislator wanted to take care of this issue throughout this reform. Constitution sets for the different shared attributions between INE and the OPLES, but left some of them for the INE. INE, which is the institute, is in charge of doing the training for those that will be acting during the election year at the polling stations. There is a coordination with the local public bodies, OPLES, that has to be conveyed to those people that will be in charge of managing the documentation on the election day. Then we have to see, geography-wise, what will be the divisions, and then they will be responsible for the voters' rosters. From the INE, we have to define the rules. Preliminary results, tally, among others. And then the Constitution sets for what are the actions that fall under the responsibility of INE and to the OPLES. At a federal level, it is for the INE. INE can establish criteria on the design for the ballots, but local-wise, we have to decide who will be producing them. Quick tallies. Each of the authorities can do this quick tally. That's very specific for Mexico City, and Erika can tell us more about that. INE has decided to do quick tallies for the governorships and for Mexico City mayor position. Mexico City will be the only body that will be doing quick tallies for the different townships. And then it is the institute that will be dictating the rules. But we try to take into consideration, and that's part of my job, is to try to see what is the reality at a local level and try to improve all those definitions and directives or guidelines that we will be establishing. INE has the delegation. So far, the Institute has not decided to delegate an operation to a local level. That will be in a practical way. It is an activity that the local bodies have to do. Since 2014, we had two cases, Puebla in 2019, in an election for governor, and in Puebla, that is where we had to assume all the operation. Quick tally for governorships will be done by INE, even if normally that falls under the responsibility of the local public bodies, OPLES. But if there is any kind of interference in joint operation, the INE will say, yes, this norm sets this rule, but now I can apply a specific purpose ruling for that. As for 2014, we have a coordination amongst the different entities. We have concurrent elections that has occurred in 2015, 19, 20, and now in 24. So the next 2 years will be the slowest one that we have because we only have two entities that will be holding elections. Since the INE was created, INE has participated in 451 elections to different positions, ordinary at a local level and 75 extraordinary election processes from 2015 up to date. Another attribution is to appoint local public bodies. Since 2015, INE has to appoint them. OPLES have to be integrated by 7 people. And if you realize, we have appointed 400 councils, 200 presidency, and INE has always been claiming for parity participation. If we see the total amount of elected positions, we have women's participation, and this is the distribution that you can see on the screen. We have 2 presidents level at Campeche, and here we are determining local budget. I won't stay long in this image, but each OPLES has to ask for the budget to their Congress and the approval of the Congress. We see a lot of disparity in recent years in how those resources are allocated so they can perform their operations. Then they have their own organization calendar that is approved by INE. Here we have an exchange of information according to the activities that they have to put in place, along with INES. We establish a joint calendar. They have their own route, and then in the screen you see all the subtopics that integrate all these activities, and we match dates and way of doing them. Here you see the calendars according to the dates since 2015. To the extent that we move forward, we have been perfecting coordination among bodies, and the amount of activities has increased. In 32 entities, we have 7,249 activities that have taken place, and then we check activity per activity if they are met in due time and form, identify delays, and if delays, then can take care of them. Each entity has its own activity calendar. Each Congress can establish where they will be having their pre-campaigns, the maximum number of days for pre-campaigns, for campaigns, to collect assistance from the citizenry or support for independent nominees. And INE will be analyzing with the local bodies what is in the law, and then we will match the delays. The INE will attract the dates according to the local norms, and we create blocks. So if you see to the left side, you can see that there are blocks on pre-campaign dates. We respect the number of days according to the local rules, but we establish blocks. Why? Because INE, as an institute, can check and verify all those activities. But specific things can be also managed.
And they can decide in which months they will start their electoral processes. Each color represents each process beginning. And as Miguel was saying, at a federal level, they install the 300 federal districts and the 32 local councils of the institutes in each of these states. So look at the local field, how many deconcentrated ones we have. So there is a very wide surveillance on the development of the electoral process. Here we have all of the district councils that are part of the local districts. On the right, we have all of the municipal councils that are also installed in the country. And these are the ones that are going to surveil the development of the tally. So what is at stake? More than 20,708 positions. All of the countries under elections, considering everything that we have included, the different city councils, mayorships, everything. These are for governors. Look at the cases of Chiapas and Morelos. Each state, of course, could have local parties as well. Look at the possible combinations, and this is what Miguel was talking about, how complex documents are. Chiapas and Morelos, the day of the polling booth, the polling station, they have their own acts in terms of the possible combinations that the candidates have. So we have also covered this type of designs in order to be able to do the scrutiny and the tally of the polling station. And That's all I wanted to share with you. These are like the convergence aspects, and Miguel already explains how all of these rules that I have shared with you, they converge in the due development, and how the electoral day, E-Day, is developed through a unique polling booth. But as you can see, the great and the main challenge is for all of the local specificities are observed, are supported, and cared for. So the E-Day, the citizens' will, both in the federal and local levels, are respected. Thank you so much, my dear Giancarlo, for sharing this overview. The coordination between local electoral institutes, such as the one that Erika, the counselor, will be discussing with us. And I, of course, am witness of everything that was said. Here at the outreach office, we also have a national outreach, which is the department that the institute gives the responsibility to establish this coordination, the signing of agreements. So I don't want to say anything further, nor will I say if we get along or not. I will leave it up to the electoral counselor, Erika Estrada Ruiz. Please, Counselor, Madam Counselor. Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to stand because we've been sitting for many hours this morning. So I think we are quite serious, all of us, right? So definitely most of you are having jet lag situations, have traveled for hours. So I know that arriving to Mexico City was hard. So I would like to start by thanking you for your amazing commitment and for being with us today in our country, in our city, providing knowledge, experience, and everything that you've experienced from different parts of the world, so we can, from Mexico, know what is your opinion about how we organize the elections and tell a little bit about what we're doing during this electoral process. As our colleagues mentioned, the electoral foundation, well, it's something difficult. We have 32 local authorities. We have also national authorities. These local authorities, as they have been mentioned before, as Miguel Angel and Jan mentioned, we used to work autonomously, independently. We were owners of our own processes. But what happened in 2014, as Jan was mentioning, and I won't elaborate, because we are going to send you this information, both Jan's and ourselves, if Jan allows it to, so you have all of the numbers, data, because it is a lot of information, I know. But before having these 32 electoral authorities, local ones that were completely autonomous, independent, full of their own processes, well, there was no standardization, process standardization at a country level. The federal authority would do things their own way, and each state would do also things their own way, kind of respecting federalism and each of the different states, and recognizing the fact that processes can be different. Citizen integration is different. We have states with indigenous peoples and communities with different ways to perceive politics. So that's why there are still local electoral bodies, such as the one that I work at the Institute of Mexico City, but with standardized processes that the INE mandates. So virtually what we do locally goes through the supervision, the approval, or the fine-tuning of the Electoral National Institute, the INE, in order to standardize processes with higher quality what we do in the country. This is why we have the INE as the national authority and the 32 local authorities as well. And I'm going to highlight that we always respect federalism, plurality, the identity that each of us have in the state that we live at, and that we are different in some of our processes. There are things that do make us steer clear from the INE mode, the INE's way, because we have to also adapt to the region, to plurality, and there are important political aspects, not only illegal. The politics of each state has different demands. There is a different local electoral processes characteristics to it. Now I understand better, because I used to be an INE family, now an ISEM family, but this allows me to talk about both authorities, local and national ones, and how they standardize processes and how we can advance to a better electoral system. So, my colleagues already shared some of the many functions that we do, in which we do it hand in hand, and for which we are always bothering Miguel Angel or calling Giancarlo and telling him, hey, how do we do this? How do we do that? So the communication department is in charge of that. But there are some activities where processes are completely, the organisms, electoral organisms and bodies are completely owning them. Now I'm only going to talk about 3 or 4 of them, the ones that are owned by the local electoral bodies. These are things that are very important, I believe, that you should know and that we do locally. So the entrance in electoral processes, or the main entrance, let's say, the main important electoral moment is registering candidacies. That's when people that are within a political party raise their hand and they're like, you know what, I want to be a candidate. In order to register the candidacies, the doors that they knock on is the local electoral bodies. They go to the one that each state has to refer to, they bring the documentation, and we as the authority in each state, we have to make sure that they comply with all of the requirements, often or not, that the standard, the regulation states. So this is the first activity that electoral bodies do when we are in an electoral process. In Mexico City, currently, there are 287 popular election positions. One is the mayor of Mexico City and the different districts mayors. And we also have the city councilships. So out of all of these people, we at the local institute, we have to go over the requirements, as I just mentioned. In this electoral process, we need to have more than 3,000 people competing only in Mexico City. And we had to go over all of their documentation. So we had to receive it, and we have to review it. That's the formal part of it. But we also have to go over the substantial part of it, which is very important, which is complying with all of parity rules and regulations, going over standards that the National Electoral Institute has established, but also the legislation of Mexico City. Mexico City's constitution demands to have parity bodies, and this means that Congress, which is integrated by 66 representations, need to have 33 women and 33 men, and this is what's going to mean why and how political parties do their candidacies, where we demand for them to have parity formulas. So you have a male candidate, and the standing has to be a different gender, and sex. So that's how we achieve parity in Congress and in all of the positions. As I was telling you, we have 16 mayorships also in competence, so they have to also adhere to parity regulations. So all of the parties have to postulate the same number of men and women for these 16 mayorships. Another activity that I would like to add from the Electoral Institute of Mexico City, that's right now in electoral processes, is that yes, the INE is in charge of going over everything related to auditing. This is the origin and the destination of resources, and there's going to be a specific presentation on auditing. This is a national activity. However, local electoral bodies have to offer this prerogative to political parties in Mexico City. These millions of dollars that month after month are given to them so they can do their activities. But we also have the responsibility of setting the cap of electoral campaign expenses, because according to Mexico's rules, candidacies have a limit, an expense cap, an expense limit that they cannot go over, because it could mean then the annulment of the elections if some situations may have influenced the elections, where money may have been a factor that helped them succeed in receiving more votes. So let's say that that's a little bit what we do separate from the INE. Now another important aspect, controversy solution that has to do with electoral campaigns. All of them have to be submitted before local authorities. I was talking about this, but we are really giving value to the subnational, which is the one that states their game rules. And also these claims are addressed locally. In this electoral process, if I remember correctly, we are about 1,700 claims that have been already submitted related to the process and that have to do all the way from campaign anticipated actions, interference by some public official, the unduly use of public resources, personalized promotion, and an important topic that was discussed in the first roundtable is all of the claims related to gender-based political violence in every state. They are also addressed by local authorities. The national body is in charge of claims only related to federal positions, but each state has its own legal body, its own structure, and its own way to organize, as we mentioned before. I wanted to share this slide for you to see some of the important functions that we perform currently when we work in organizing the electoral process hand in hand. Miguel Angel already mentioned that we have the integration of the polling stations committees that have to do with electoral geography, the roster, the list of voters. That's also by the National Electoral. And the rules, regulations, guidelines of many activities that we as local institutes should address. Also radio and TV prerogative, that's also up to the national body, and also the campaign auditing system. It is very important for you to hear about comments on democracy actually existing in Mexico. If we have actually invested in the electoral process, well, it depends on how you address how an electoral authority is developed. They do many activities that probably in other countries they are disseminated in different institutes, different bodies, courthouses. Here the administrative authority brings many activities together related to auditing, as I mentioned before, organizing debates, monitoring radio and TV spots, solving conflicts and disputes, and in other cities or countries maybe it would be a special department that would be in charge of it. But this makes us have a very robust system that has been consolidated through many years by means of national and local activities. Now, local activities correspond to each state, and they are on screen. And as Miguel Angel was saying, we work together hand in hand in preparing for the electoral day, in registering candidates, as I mentioned before, in determining campaign caps, and of course, from local electoral institutions, we also do our quick tallies, that is the selection of the polling booth samples so we can determine statistics results during E-Day. At the Mexico City Electoral Institute, we have approved our own quick tally for mayorships. We will be ready like at 11 or 12 a.m. on June 3rd with the statistics of the 13,500 polling booths that will be installed only in Mexico City. Out of these 13,500, we've already selected a sample. We, not as councillors, but there's a specialized committee that will have members for that quick tally, quick count. This has selected already a sample of around 19,000 polling stations, so that we, at 11:30 p.m., more or less, at 12 of June 2nd, we are going to give a statistical result, and we will also start a preliminary result program that each local electoral institute is also in charge of. There is a difference with national authority that's stated by legislation. National authority, once the polling stations are closed at 6 p.m., they start the tally of the votes in each of the polling stations by our neighbors. They fill out the act, the official document, the electoral package, and they bring it to their headquarters, and they say, we'll safekeep it for 3 days. And as of Wednesday, the INE will start the tally so that they can add up everything that was received from the 6 different districts of the country. But in Mexico City, it works differently. In Mexico City, the same night that elections are over, we start with the tally. This means that we do not keep documentation in a warehouse at the legislation, like the legislation demands INE to do. In Mexico City, it's like you won't sleep, you won't stop. You will start that same night when electoral packages arrive to the districts. The electoral officials officials will receive it, and that same night, all of the tally and counting will begin. So when the INE is starting, the IECM is already concluding. It is just a legal design, which is the one that establishes so, and this is what we will have to face for the next day after June 2nd in order to be able to deliver the majority certificates of those that have won. And since time is golden, and I am really talking a lot here, I just want to share all of the authorities that are involved, at least in Mexico City, and that participate in the elections. We have the National Authority as the leading axis of all of the activity that we do. We have the Mexico City Electoral Institute, that I am a member in its General Council. We also have an electoral tribunal in Mexico City, which is independent and different from the one of the judicial branch that you had the opportunity to already visit and listen to the Justice Soto. There is also a specialized office for electoral crimes. There is a Ministry of Foreign Affairs also supporting, and the Electoral Tribunal itself, because there are challenges that could reach that level, and there's also the Ministry of Citizen Security. One question was actually by Gloria, and the question was, how do you coordinate during E-Day with other authorities? Well, here we organize work tables with our city authorities that are in charge of citizen security and safety in order to be able to coordinate and have enough police elements on E-Day. As we were saying, installing 13,500 polling booths in Mexico City, and this coordination means that there is a Ministry of Citizen Security and Safety involved only in those activities to safeguard polling stations, polling booths. Are 33 different district headquarters throughout the city where we will keep electoral material and where the votes will be sent on June 3rd. So we also have the support of the Ministry of Citizen Safety and Security, as I just mentioned, and there is also a direct support line. So if in any time at the electoral body we had or we received news that there could be a red flag or a warning, maybe a neighbor was really upset and it turns out that they want to skip the line, or if they want to break the line, or anything that has to do with the safety of the officials, we have an open hotline so that we can communicate with the Ministry of Citizen Safety, with the Ministry of the Interior, and of course there are established processes and protocols in order to follow the chain of command. There is a chain of command in the Electoral Institute of Mexico City that corresponds to the Executive Secretariat and the Council itself in order to prevent criteria dispersion or activity dispersion. The important thing here is to keep calm, know what phone number to call, know who you could be receiving a phone call if there was any warning, any red flag, to also coordinate with national authorities, because let us remember that the polling booth, the polling station, is shared during the activities, and we have to be communicated at all times of what will be happening that day. Now, I already told you about this one. This is the map of Mexico City, and what we are going to be doing on June 2nd, which is the candidate for Mexico City's mayorship and 12 different mayorships and city councilships. So we have these 13 also mayors sections, but we also have district sectors and all of the electoral geography that you already know, where almost 8 million people will be able to vote. And here, only as a statistic, a piece of data, I wanted you to see how we are distributed in Mexico City. We have 7.9 million voters, 53% are women, 43% are men, and we are going to have a lot of young voters. We have 2.6 million, virtually 33% of our nominal roster, nominal list is young voters between 18 to 35, people that will vote for the first time. We also have a population sector that's very important, that we are inviting them to vote, to exercise their rights this June 2nd, so we can achieve a historic number of votes. in presidentials is when the most amount of people go out and vote. That's when things get better. And we are almost in 70% of the nominal list for presidentials. Hopefully this June 2nd we will be above that goal. At least the bet is for people to truly go out and exercise their voting rights, as I mentioned, in full freedom, so that all of this electoral foundation can shine. So I won't elaborate. I just wanted to share this with you because this is what I was telling you about. This is the logic of what happens once the polling stations, polling booths are closed, how the officials count the votes to the tally. They do the electoral packages and they bring it to our district headquarters so that we start the full tally. So as you can see, there are many activities that we share. Fortunately, we get along very well. We have known each other for many, many years, and we've been friends in different battles, which helps a lot in order to be able to be better communicating and coordinated with full trust that we are working so that on June 2nd everything will go great. So thank you so much for your attention, and we are here for any question that you may have. Thank you, Electoral Councilor Erika Estrada Ruiz. I have some questions that I have been given already. Some of them are for all of you, some of them are for one of you. This question reads, how is custody of the transportation of the electoral packages ensured? How is the custody of the transportation of the electoral package ensured? And then they ask about the role of the National Guard. So those are the two first questions. Very well. So how do we guarantee the safe transportation once the voting concludes to our deconcentrated bodies? Before E-Day, each district meetings do a feasibility study, which is the route that this electoral package will have to follow to the different electoral district. But they will also go over the mechanism that they will use. We have three types of mechanisms. One that's called center or fixed recollection center, and we have the itinerant, the temporary one, and we have also one for officials that will deliver the electoral package themselves. So in district meetings, they let me tell you about the fixed one. The fixed one is a fixed place where the president of the polling station directorate comes and we receive the electoral package there in order to afterwards bring it to the district headquarters. So we meet halfway, let's say. The itinerant, the traveling, is one that comes closer to the polling station's official president, the directorate, and then we bring it to the district headquarters. And the rest is the support device. They could be leasing a vehicle directly bringing the president of the polling station directorate to the deconcentrated body that will be in charge of the tally. And of course, there's a logistic that has to be followed and that district councils approve and that we share with local institutes so that they provide their feedback, and with the point of view of both authorities, they approve it or not. Of course, this information is shared with safety forces so that they monitor the due transportation of materials at the end of E-Day. I think that this answers the first question. Now I'm going to go for the second question, which is the role that the National Guard plays. We as National Electoral Institute always sign cooperation agreements, not only with the National Guard, but also with Homeland Security and with the Navy. Why? Well, because they provide safekeeping for our facilities where we safeguard first the votes and then when we do the tally. You know that in Mexico City we do the recount and the vote per vote and polling station by polling station. This is something that's done after the tally, always protected by the federal safety and security forces. Now, why are these? Well, because there are places where we have costs that are in charge of the Navy, others by Homeland Security. So as a result of the previous process, the National Guard also is involved with these tasks. So as I was telling you, from the moment the ballots are printed, safe kept, and transported to the deconcentrated bodies, they provide safety, security, and support. But always, always, well, never, they never get in touch with the documents. They are never in touch with the documents. They provide safety, security, but they are always accompanying officials of Electoral Institute, National Guard, Homeland Security. They never touch the documents. They are never in charge of, how to say it, of managing electoral material. Their role is only supporting institutes in safeguarding all of the trajectory that's followed to transport that documentation. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel Angel. And the next question is to elaborate a little bit further. It's open for whomever would like to intervene. What measure in terms of safety are you implementing for E-Day, in particular for high-risk population, in terms of violence? Okay, so, yeah. As I was sharing a moment ago, we are coordinated with citizen safety departments in order to identify regions that could be at risk in our city, which also happens in other states. But especially in order to be quite alert of any situation where there could be population groups, vulnerable population groups. In Mexico City, well, we have atypical situations, conflict-wise, talking about what could happen, and the risk situations that could happen are really basic. For example, a place where there's a difficult access because some streets are closed, some other places where some criminal rates are higher, theft, or groups are on the streets that may be drinking or that could be inebriated. So there is a map on how the conflict could be happening, where the red flags are really little, really few of them. However, we have to be aware that there's always a dormant risk. When citizens come out, we have to be prepared to minimize any scenario, any situation where there could be an attack to vulnerable groups. In polling stations and booths, what tends to happen is that if there was a priority group, older adults, people with disability, they have a preference. They can skip the line, they don't have to wait, and they could be alone or assisted by a person, and they can go all the way to the booth without any problem. With the only thing they have to do is talk to the official and say, you know what, this person needs support. I'm going to go inside the booth with them, and they will exercise their right. We also have material for people with disability, and it will be explained in a roundtable tomorrow in detail. So we will have also support provided to priority groups. And in the rest of the country, the situation could be different from Mexico City, and I would like to pass the floor to Jan so that he can complete this answer. Yes, exactly, just to complete. One of the slides that Erica showed on how there is a coordination among different authorities in Mexico City, that's reproduced in the rest of the states. There is coordination and joint effort. The ideal is to have tables established. They have different names. It can be governability tables. It doesn't matter. The thing is that the authorities have to receive common information that allows to provide protection so that E-Day develops peacefully. Also, there is a national electoral system that allows for very particular situations in some states to be shared in the federal table or the government table, and certain measures are taken. So, as Miguel mentioned, the National Guard or the Federal Armed Forces can support in safekeeping this electoral material in the different states. Thank you, Giancarlo. This question is for you. About the quick tally, the quick count, the company is in-house company, or it is an outsourced company, or each state has its own company? How does it work? Yeah, the quick tally, quick count. Well, it is by the National Electoral Institute. There is an expert committee, a specific expert committee. This is quite relevant, I think. I don't know if there's any work table about it. If I remember correctly, there are 11 members to it, and the way it works is really interesting for me. They have different experience, different type of studies and expertise. Each of them break into teams, if I remember correctly, and we are going to have a quick tally for presidency, for House of Representatives, for Senate, and for 8 governors, and also a government department. So they divide the work in such a way that among groups they will do the estimate tally. And they don't use one same method, all of the groups. They use different methodologies and statistics in order to reach the same end, which is a quick tally, a quick count. So this committee works directly with the National Electoral Institute. The sample is collected, they determine how sound or robust they need for the sample to be, and through the organization, they do all of the operations program on how they will receive that information on E-Day. So it's tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow, when they will estimate the sample size and they would do all of the operational process in order to be able to obtain information. And in the particular case of Mexico City, which I think that Erika can elaborate a little bit further, they can and they will do it for the different mayorships. Out of the ones that will have this exercise, she's the only one that's going to do it for a local environment, for a local level. 7 members, yes, thank you, 7 members. In Mexico City, we also have our own quick count, which is a process where the institute has full ownership. It's not any outsourced company that's hired, but that we have this group of specialists, as Jan was saying, that cooperate directly with the institution. In the case of Mexico City, we have 5 people, 5 men and 2 women, that are experts in mathematics and statistics that have already worked in other processes with the institute. And traditionally speaking, we were doing the quick tally of the Mexico City mayorship, but however, for this electoral process, the National Electoral Institute decided to undertake the quick count for the Mexico City representative, and we are only going to be doing the mayorships. So yesterday, as I was telling you, we already did the sample of 13,500 polling stations. In Mexico City, there's a sample of 1,690, and the information will come out of those in order to estimate the winners in each mayorship. And it is quite a very certain task. There is a similarity that's almost exact of the results between the quick count and the definitive count. And yesterday we did the extraction of the seed sample, which is the 2 polling stations that will be used as an access in order to do Mexico City's mapping, and we can get the results that same June 2nd. With these experts that I was telling you that work directly with us, we give them a monthly payment for a short period of time, 6 or 7 months that they work in the institution. They are the ones that use the methodology. We as an institute, we are shared and we are given certain information, and the seed sample that was obtained yesterday, as well as the sample of those 16,960 polling stations, are sealed before a notary, a public notary. In this case, we will have an executive secretary that will keep the envelopes that are fully sealed for any procedure that of revision procedure that has to be done. The most important thing to tell you here is that all of the procedure could be reproduced, which means that you can go to the end step and you can go back, so you can check all of the stages, and there's full certainty of what's being done institutionally.
Thank you. Very quickly, an express question. PrEP, what is the difference? Because you mentioned it previously. Well, quick tally is a statistic sample. Quick tally or count takes the sample from that polling station at the time, so they can have a statistic for that night. PrEP is different. Preliminary results is a result of the ballots of all the polling stations, that they take a picture of that polling station, and the 13,500 will appear in the PrEP. PrEP is an outcome of the work that we do at the INE, and electoral institutes do it with their own staff, with their own resources. We don't delegate that work to outsourcing. So we will be asking all the officials working at the polling stations to send us a picture that will be nourishing our PrEP. So each citizen can go and see preliminary results and see the preliminary results of their polling station. Maybe there might be some errors, but we can do the tally of these 13,500 polling stations. It starts around 8 at night, and they will be working all night long until the next day when they finish tallying all these 13,500 polling stations or places. And then we will have more information tomorrow regarding the PrEP preliminary results. The political parties appear according to their participation. Will the order be by a draw? Have you ever considered of the order that they appear on the ballots? Well, nobody has proposed to do it by a draw. I think that they are quite used to the rule that the political parties will be appearing according to the registration date. If they have registered on the same date, then we will go to applications. So we had to go to the time in which they made their application. It is an agreement that the political parties have accepted. We have always acted that way, and nobody has done any other kind of proposal. Well, maybe this question will have several answers. What is the amount in dollars? And if they do a financing of campaign, and if it's done to the political party or to the nominee. We don't have advance payment. That is very different from the other systems in Latin America. What we do is that we approve a budget per year for ordinary expenses. In addition, there's a budget for political parties that will be exclusive for campaign activities. It's a huge burst of money that will be managed in a monthly basis. We don't need to receive the proof for the expenses. We give January, February, on the 10th or 12th of every month, we will be delivering that money to the political parties in accounts that they will be rendering to the national authorities and to the finance people that can disburse that money to all the campaigns. It is up to the political party to decide on how they will be allocated those expenses. We are trying to give the same playground grounds for women and for men candidates, but we don't have that advance payment. We manage it monthly, and then we will have the report that all the candidates nominated will have to give to the electoral authorities what were the incomes that they received, how much money they received from the political parties or from donations, either from private or in kind, and then give the breakdown of how they have used that money, if it has been in TV and broadcast spots or other activities. Once the electoral process is over, the election day is over, they have 1 month and a half to submit their expenses report. And that is how we control all campaigns. And it is really fast, time-consuming. With the control table, they will tell you all what they have to do. It is a model that has been improved within time, so we can receive all these expenses reported online by the different candidates that have been nominated by the parties. And for Mexico City, 62 million pesos can be expended by the mayor for Mexico City. That will be around $3,500,000. We established two fixed amounts for the president and for deputies. That is equivalent to what we have of the same amount of citizenry that will be participated. That will depend on the size of that federated entity. We have very big ones like the state of Mexico and very small ones as Campeche and Colima. For the presidents of the Republic in dollars, we will be talking about $38 million. 660 million pesos, and for deputies 2 million pesos, and for deputies 2,300,000 Mexican pesos. And for the state of Mexico, it has a total amount of 44 million pesos because it is the biggest state. In order to determine financing, as for the thresholds, the local entity will decide. Financing rule is similar, a percentage according to the voters roster per entity, but there's a logic that brings down that financing works. They have lowered as well the percentage of the ballot box that will be determining finances. Each local institute determines the threshold of the expenses. I know there's a high interest on this topic, but we have to make it all the way to the break, and then we will give you the opportunity to ask questions in the next blocks. This specific question, I will be answered in INE is accountable and control fully. Accountability, at least in campaign, it is before the INE. The powers are assigned by the Constitution to the INE. All the controls, we have to do it before the INE. There are other figures that can be controlled locally. I don't want to mix you up with all of that, but keep in mind that everything that has to be controlled by the campaign will be controlled by the INE. And then we only give you good vibes for the others. The support of the citizenry, well, that is everything during the period that those that participate as independent nominees for pre-campaigns and campaign, everything is controlled by INE. And then we will have that role of control, and you were saying the control of prerogative to the political parties, and that is covered by another table that we will be holding. Between the nominees and the outcome. Mexico City is a very specific case because we are integrating everything on a parity basis. 33 women and 33 men have to participate regardless of the wins. Historically, we have been looking for a balance. Yes, the nominees have to be the same number in men and women and reaching to the congresses. We adjust through plurinominals. 33 chosen by majority and 33 by pluris. If the 33 by majority, we don't balance Congress, then we make an adjustment on the win list. We don't take out wins for majority, but our RPs, yes, we have to equilibrate or balance the capital Congress. We had more women winning. And at the moment that we run the formula, it turns out to be that the Congress was integrated by 34 women and 32 men. So we had a majority in women at the capital city Congress, Mexico City. And then men said, no, we needed to have parity. We historically, for the first time, you cannot have more women than men. And then the institute said, yes, historically, it has been disfavored as gender. And if women had the majority, we will respect that. And we allowed for 34 women and 32 men. All of the leaders of political parties challenged it. They went all the way to the Supreme Court and then, or the higher chamber, and they started to add up and said, we will have 35 women and 31 men. So we were awarded another women. And so at least in Mexico City, we do have that parity rule for Congress of Mexico City that will not depending only on the wins, but the adjustments that we have to do at a plurinominal level. Are the authority decisions can be challenged by INE, and the decisions by INE can be challenged and sent to the Electoral Tribunal? Determinations, what, let's say, decisions before the INE we can submit as the same way that we designate the councillors for the local election bodies. Yes, we can also eliminate them. Those things, yes, they can be challenged before INE. Regarding the attributions or the faculties of those local institutes, they have to go to the local authorities, as Monica was saying. A very clear example of what happens in the challenge change is the registration of nominees at a local level. You can start that process, then it goes to the regional chamber, and from there it could reach the higher chamber, something that happens often, particularly when you register your nominees. But yes, that will be according to the councilorships and presidents. Miguel Angel, they're asking you this question. I know that it will be answered later on. Do prisoners vote in Mexico? The Mexican diaspora. This question is in English. I'm trying to translate. And if so, how do they do this voting? We do have a previous experience in persons voting in preventive prison. Those citizens, men and women, that have been charged, but they have not yet been sentenced. They are in remand. And then because they are in remand, they are canceled of their voting, of their rights. But now they can be voting, and we made a survey. No, we want to ask the prisons what were the number of people that were remanded. So they went to all the prisons and collected the votes of all the persons that were remanded, that they were willing to cast their votes. So regarding those that are in a foreign country, that we decided to have an online voting and postal voting, and for the first time we will be establishing voting tables in different councils in the United States, Canada, and others. We have 3 entities that have been regulated and that are exercising it in this process. That is for Mexico City, Hidalgo, and Chiapas. They have regulated in their norms to allow the peoples that are remanded to vote, to have the right to vote. 2 questions. I will give you 1 minute, 1 minute and a half to answer them. As a closing, I think it's worthwhile. What is the greatest challenge that each one of you have on election day? I believe that the challenge is not on election day. The challenge starts when we are organizing the electoral process. It's not only one, it's so many, because they come up as we move on our process in this great structure of things that we have to carry out. The challenge is not on election day, because election day is a addition of all the steps that we have taken, all the efforts that have to be made, of all the wills of all the persons that are participating in this electoral process. So I think the election day is a party because all the citizens are participating. Challenge of what I do. Well, I would say for me the challenge is to bring together and give a cohesion to this national electoral system. For the locals, I am the centralized part of the INE, and for the INE staff, I am the defender for the local bodies. So I think that bringing together all this process, that all these needs can come together and that we can assist them at all times. I think, and I agree with my colleague, the election day is a great party. And the next post-election day activities is to do all this tally work, all local. It's not that it's not so, but at local level, it really echoes at a national level. All the tally that goes also at the town halls is very important because it's the most relevant point of contact for that population. So assistance of doing the tally is a very important task that has to be undertaken. Yes, well, there will be several, but I do agree with Jan and Miguel Angel. Jan says that he has been 10 years on the election processes. I am 22 and 23? Oh, okay, 22 and 23 years. So you cannot figure out our age. But we have been in these processes for 22 years, 23 years, and non-election process has been alike. There's also always a novelty, but we need to have peace in mind, be calm, and yes, we have a great body of technicians, professionals, administrators. Everybody knows what to do from their own position, and we need to allow them to flow on election day, because otherwise you will be interfering in the process. So you have to keep in mind what you need to do, when you have to pick up a telephone, when an alert is triggered, when it's not an alert triggered, then let everything flow. And political actors, as you know, in Mexico City has been tough. It has really been really intense. All the polls are having tight results. We have to be very careful with the readings of those polls. But as electoral authorities, we have to be alert of whatever might happen. My challenge is to have a peace of mind and let the flow go on. And that is we come to the end of our session, and I want to encourage you to ask this question in the next session. We will have Carolina del Ángel Cruz as a person that is addressing this question regarding Mexico City and the youth. I think that will be a great time to ask this question. I want to thank Miguel Ángel, Eric Estrada, and Jan for their interventions. We appreciate their insight, which is precious to us. And well, let's meet back again at 3 o'clock. We will continue with our forum. We expect you to be back at 3 o'clock sharp. Thank you so much.